Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It's Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. It's just after 1 o'clock, and we're continuing to work our way through the FY27 budget. And this afternoon, we have first with us folks from the Land Access Opportunity Board. So welcome. Nice to have you here again. We saw you at budget adjustment, and now we're back to the FY27 budget. So if you would, again, introduce yourselves for the record, and let's go through your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us this afternoon. My name is Ornella Mata Figueroa. I'm one of the co-directors of the Land Access and Opportunity Board. And I'm Jean Hamilton, the other co-director of the board. We begin everywhere with our touchstones. And I'm going to read them out loud for us, which is that we listen generously and we speak our truth from our heart and mind, that we make the way that we work together an example of what is possible, and that we trust that we each hold a piece of the puzzle and that we need each other's pieces to understand the whole picture. Do we have consent to working with those touchstones in mind during our time together? Thank you.
Great, thank you. And just to kind of set the agenda for today, first of all, thank you so much for offering us time to talk about our FY27 budget with you. It's really helpful to have this time. And thank you to this committee, particularly for supporting our Budget Adjustment Act appropriation. It has been very helpful to get our $1 million back. So we're really in the process of putting those funds to use. And it is so great that you've all supported that. So thank you. For today's agenda, we did get to meet with you all in December, so we won't go back to the beginning of what is the LAOB, but we know the LAOB is complicated. So we'll do a little bit of like a 200 level overview of what is the LAOB, and then a deep dive into one or two of our program areas, depending on what we have time for today. In this deck, which you have, there are details on our other program areas. And as always, if there's anything you have questions on, we're really happy to set up one-on-one time with you to come back and talk with the committee. We did kind of intentionally try to shorten our presentation to give a lot of time for questions. And so would just recommend that, if you have a burning clarifying question while we're presenting, we welcome those, but more substantive questions might make more sense to just pause till the end, till our Q&A time. So we'll start with just a high-level overview of our FY27 budget. And let me get it all up on the screen for you to see. So our FY27 budget is $3.2 million. It is specifically $3,217,734. Because the LAOB's work is positioned and intended to really improve all of the investments that the state makes across all of our housing and land systems and broader housing and land investments, we are working towards getting our full budget into the base budget eventually. We have, been in existence since 2022 and had kind of evolving and maturing appropriations over that time. But right now, what is in the governor's recommend for our base budget is about half of our FY27 budget. We recognize and are learning about the steps it takes to get into base and then to evolve and mature so that base budget reflects our actual annual operating budget. And that is a strategy that we have appreciated working on with this committee, and we intend to keep working there. So if one of you were to say, what's your dream for this year? Our dream would be that there's $3.2 million in the base budget for LAOB, because that reflects the true cost of us operating. The governor has recommended us in the base budget at the 3% increase that we understand was kind of typical across the board. And that's about a $1.7 million base allocation. We will need an additional $1.5 million to achieve our FY27 programming. And just to be really specific, what we get with the $1.7 million is almost complete coverage of our core operating expenses. So our staffing and our general operating, that what is currently in the base budget does not address any of our grant making or any of our program dollars. It does not even address the full breadth of our core operating expenses. So we would love, if possible this year, to see that our base appropriation actually increase beyond the governor's recommendation to 1.784 or 785, and an additional one-time appropriation of 1.54.
So I'm a little
Yeah.
confused.
Yes.
On your notes on the side, is that what the governor's recommended?
So unfortunately, this slide does not have the governor's recommend in it, but if you see like on the side, what is under FY 27, this is our proposed, what we would love to see is that this 1.784, that in the base funding would represents a 10% increase over last year's base. What the governor has recommended, and I'm just going to look at my cheat sheet here, is 1.680530. So it's that was 3%. 1.68 is a 3%. What we are suggesting we would like to do this year is 1.784. That's a 10%.
I think it would be helpful for us
Yeah.
to have sort of spreadsheet that says, here's what the governor recommends.
Right.
Here's what we would like and
Right.
what's
We
different.
can do that.
That would be really helpful because
Okay.
I
It's a
don't want
lot.
to get confused and
Totally.
focus on the wrong things here.
Yeah. Great. Okay, and then the high level number is this 3.217. That's the number we're trying to get to, and we want to work with you all to find the right strategy of what of this is base, what of this is one
And
time.
what's the total that the governor put in?
The total that the governor put in is not on this slide, but it is 1,680,530.
Oh, okay. The total is 1,680,000?
The total that the governor has recommended is 1,680,000, and yes.
Okay.
And we can certainly send a memo with laying that out in a spreadsheet.
That would be really helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Just to be clear, and or cutting to a chase, that this, you just said that this is how much it costs to keep the lights on for the whole organization, but it zeroes out essentially what programming that you've been planning and that you're working on.
So there's no one time for programming or anything in the governor's budget?
No.
And so that's the 1.78.
Sorry, this was really confusing. Sorry, we will present it better. The additional funds that we need to achieve our FY 27 budget is 1.5 million.
You're asking for 1.5 million.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Great, make sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
And just apologies if the way that I'm talking about base and one time is confusing. This is a new learning for me of what is the multi-year strategy to move us towards the kind of sustained and sustainable funding that this type of organization really requires. So what goes into one time versus what goes into base this year is something that I would love to just ask directly for your assistance with how do we think about that strategy and what's reasonable and what do other agencies and organizations work on in that regard.
So if I look at I just want to go back to your spreadsheet. So you have programming costs of 1,280,000. And is that broken down below? Does that all add up to 1,280,000?
Exactly right.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is kind of the 200 level overview of what is the LEOB. Of course, in December, we were here and we did a lot about our statute and who's on our board. We just want to remind you all that we were founded in statute in 2022 with the purpose of promoting improvements in access to woodlands, farmland, and land and home ownership for Vermonters from historically marginalized or disadvantaged communities who continue to face those barriers. If you have not familiarized yourself with our statute, we always encourage people to read it. It is really a fascinating piece of policy. Just the statute itself is worthy of celebration. What I want to highlight here for you all today is our statute has about 9 duties listed in it. Many of them, the majority of them, focus on what we call our advisory powers. So really focused on systems improvement, kind of systems auditing and systems improvement across all of Vermont's housing and land access programs. We'll speak a little bit about what our advisory powers look like, but often people think, oh, the LAOB is intended to make grants or do down payment assistance grants. That is something we can do within our statute. It is one of the purposes and powers within our duties, but the majority of our duties are really intended to focus our attention and work in collaboration with the Department of Taxes, Agency of Agriculture, ACCD, VHCB, Sustainable Jobs Fund, and on and on and on. These are named entities that LAOB is intended to work with to identify how their programming has created and continues to exacerbate barriers to housing and land access. And to illustrate what some of this work looks like, we have this slide, which is like kind of at a glance of where has LAOB been, who have we been working with. We have been named to a number of official legislative working groups, which you'll see here in this first list. We have worked with a number of community collaborators, which you'll see here. You know, many of our community collaborators are just individual Vermonters who want to build houses or want to promote resilience in their communities. We haven't listed them all here, but this gives you a sense. We have had explicit advisory powers contracts with a number of agencies and institutions and entities, which is this list here. And of course, we have a very robust board of 12 entities, which is listed here. So we're not going to spend a lot of time with this list, but there's so many stories, there's so much depth that's represented on this slide. And we really welcome you, either today during our discussion time or later at another time to come and talk with us about what does it look like for the LAOB to work with the Vermont Chamber of Commerce, for example.
Yeah, so this slide is important because you're not just one organization. I mean, it strikes me, this isn't to diminish anything, but it seems to me like the work that you do is like cumin. Cumin by itself isn't a very interesting spice. It doesn't stand by itself, but when added to everything, it lifts it up. And that's, I mean, I
wouldn't think cumin, but okay.
I'm thinking of chili. I can't stand cumin by itself, but in chili, it boosts its flavor and its heartiness. I mean, I'm looking at this going, how many committees are you testifying in order to tell your story this particular year? I mean, because this is, I'm just throwing a number out. There's at least 7 here in the House alone. How many people are you testifying to?
I mean, do you want to answer?
I'm trying to think. 4, 5 committees?
We're actively in both ag committees and in housing and economic development. As you're pointing to, we should be in judiciary. We should be in GovOps. We, of course, are in appropriations as well. So yeah, 6, 7.
I think that's
And this will grow as folks know of our work. So as you hear of where we should be, let us know and we will be there. So as our work grows, we are then in more places and people are learning our contributions and how we are impacting the systems in different ways. And I think that will give us the opportunity to tell our story there.
And I think just lifting it up a little bit too, the way the board is made up, when you talk about people who've been marginalized, that was the whole point, was to give voice as best we can to this list of organizations that list off just individuals and Vermonters who didn't feel like they had a voice.
That's a great prompt to say that in addition to people feeling like they didn't have a voice, I would really recommend that you all look at, who's a partner that you have on this list and go ask them like, hey, what's your work with the LAOB been like? And what I anticipate you will hear is working with the LAOB has felt very productive. It has brought us into communities that we have not been able to connect with because we have had not trusting relationships with those communities. We've had access to new ideas and new perspectives. And LAOB has brought capacity that we didn't have to fulfill the kinds of projects that we were trying to do. LAOB is bringing new perspective, approaches, and capacity to actually conquering some of these persistent problems, which we'll skip this slide, but these persistent problems that you all know because we live and breathe them every day. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Ornella, to do more questions.
Yep, before you hand it over, go ahead, Wendy.
Give us a couple examples of projects.
Yeah, this is where we're heading to next. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about our resilience hubs. So you want to go down there? Yeah, the Resilience Hub Toolkit is one example of how the LAOB is fulfilling our statutory purpose. We were invited into early conversations with these frontline organizers after the 2023 floods, and we participated through research and development phases, trying to witness and then communicate what we were seeing and having a lot of conversations specifically about FEMA's dwindling reliability, which we all know right now. We got reports back last week, right? No FEMA for the Northeast Kingdom. The critical lack of capacity at the municipal level, especially in the face of rising demands. The unsustainability of using public resources to treat the symptoms and consequences of systemic problems. So, right, we've been putting a lot of Band-Aids and fixing a lot of crisis instead of looking at what are the root causes. A clear need to build solutions that fix root problems, as I just said, and then build a preventative resilience framework. And that Vermonters across the state are eager to be a part of stronger communities and a part of being part of the solution. From all of these like conversations and from all of this research, we determined that the resilience hubs are a low-cost investment that can catalyze significant returns for communities and the state as a whole. So far, with our Resilience Hubs funding, we've received 37 hub applications that are ready to serve all counties in our state. And applicants span the list of possible sectors, from conservation to municipal to grassroots to healthcare to education institutions, all represented in the Community Resilience Hub applications. Our communities have spoken. This is a meaningful structure to address many gaps. You saw in our proposed FY27 budget, right now we have $350,000 that are secured for our Resilience Hub grants. In the BAA, we're pending $250,000, and then in FY27, we're hoping to invest another $400,000. Our goal is to create a cohort of 16 to 20 hubs that are launching at the same time, so that hubs can support one another in learning and strategies, and that hubs can coordinate across the state, learn from the ground up. And as we were talking about getting impacted community members in the decision-making, here we see an example of the LAOB listening to the communities, and then from that listening, developing a program that is definitely meaningful and where folks are wanting to access this program and this funding based on what the community actually needs and what they can and cannot do, and how the state can most efficiently direct its limited resources to build the most impactful collaboration in communities. So again, responding to community needs after disaster teaches us what the community needed. It taught us what the community needed, and then how to be ready to respond to disaster in the future, and what capacity and municipal infrastructures are needed to support the work that needs to happen. So we chose this investment because it offered infrastructure. We also have this Resilience Hub Toolkit, which tells us what are the practical things needed, what do we need to buy, what are the specific actions we need to take to build a resilient community, and then the community of practice for these hubs that can offer a space and container for municipalities to connect with technical assistance and intersect with all of these support systems right now that we know are so necessary. Because at the municipal level, at the municipal level, this lack of technical assistance support, this lack of capacity is impacting our enforcement of rulemaking all across the board. Because we need municipal capacity for Act 250 and zoning. We need municipal capacity so people can build and apply for grants and apply for federal infrastructure dollars. And all of this right now doesn't have a container to exist. We even have, right, a push to move shelter to municipalities and no infrastructure to do this. So this is an example of how the LAOB can pick one investment with our thoughtful, very small dollars and pick a lever that then can unlock potential in a lot of different ways for a lot of sectors in our state. Thank you.
So we have in your slides, like there's more detail on all of our programs. We don't have time. We're just gonna go down. This is what it looks like. And we'll just leave this slide up for any questions you have. But basically, this is a timeline of what the LAOB has been doing since 2022. And I think we told you in December, and we'd love to tell you again, that this is a timeline of success. This is a timeline of a legislative initiative that has methodically built out the core foundations. We have administrative capacity. We have an active, very thoughtful, skilled board. We have gone from 2 co-directors to a staff of 5. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Vermonters inside the system and outside of the system, ready and willing to step up and work together on these thorny structural problems that really need more people power to fix. And we have built trusting relationships with the key players. We're launching programs now. This is the moment to double down with the investment, not to zero out the investment. This has been a lot of R&D and development that's brought us here today.
You have done a lot of work. I do have a question on the shelter for all, and I'm just wondering if you are working with the Agency of Human Services, if they reached out to work with you about shelter, because they talk about a shelter first state and housing initiative that seems to revolve around shelters. So have you been in conversation with them?
We haven't been in conversation directly with the Agency of Human Services, but we are a part of the HHAB, which is the Housing and Homelessness Alliance.
Okay.
And via that network, we are in touch and communicating through and with them.
Okay. So a little more tangentially, but you were involved.
And we are hopeful. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we also have a lot of inroads we've been building. So for example, in our work with the Developmental Disabilities Housing Initiative and the support we've provided to the Act 69 working group, that has given us, I guess I want to step back and say so much of the structural reform is about identifying these like little levers along the way. And so that's an example of just one of the communities we're in where we have been able to identify, okay, so we're connected with VHCB, and if VHCB comes to the table and then DD Council is at the table, and then what is happening at AHS and where can we strategically bring the voices in to make those, micro changes, like what's happening with group home licensing. And so there's a lot, like before we get to, are we working with AHS? Background around support services, which similarly with the Office for New Americans and,
another example for shelter, for example, is that with our grants, we strategically built a document that then improves services and then builds capacity for the services with our funding. So then to grow and make sure that we are using federal evidence-based strategies within our shelter system and make sure that the local capacity is built with our funding to be able to then improve rehab systems in the state through the shelter.
Okay, I'm glad you're involved. That's good to hear. Okay, great. Tom, did you have anything else at this point?
No, yes, I'll be in touch with them. They're part of my portfolio, so we'll go through a lot of the things that we didn't see or hear from. The other piece, I just want to, in the short time that they've been really working, I think what's remarkable is how other parts of the government are taking them as an evolution rather than just be able to say, this is what we should be doing. So when I saw the quote from Mark Bosma, Vermont Emergency Management, I don't think any of us had an idea that LAOB would be
Right.
tied into emergency management.
Right.
And be able to work with them, not even work with them, but be able to produce work product that was useful to them, especially with the lack of federal
Right.
help on some levels. And so it's those kinds of connections, I think, that are going to be hard for people to understand
Sure.
in general, and trying to keep those threads alive so that people don't see you as a siloed organization, that how much it's spread out, spidered out into the world is, I can't be happier to see it have happened like this, and will continue to.
So more of a connector than a silo, which is important. We need more connections.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll work with them in terms of
Okay.
whatever advocacy we
Great.
need to arrange.
Great,
for.
and then we'll get an updated spreadsheet so we can understand better. Great, so thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Is there one more thing you have a look on your face?
No, I'm just trying to get out of here. Sorry.
You can be unhosted or something. Autumn can take you off hosting.
Just unplug it. Just unplug it.
That's okay, yeah, that's how we do things. We just unplug. Great, thank you all very much. Okay. Now we're going to switch gears to the past or the present. And we have Emily and Grady, and who else is going to show up to talk to us about budget adjustment? And are you handing out? Oh, yes. Okay. Your screen. While Emily's getting ready, we've moved the Humanities Council to 2:45 from 3:45. So they're going to be up first, and we're going to probably take our break.
Yeah.
Emily might need an hour, but she might not, but we'll take a break by 2:30. While you're here, we might just ask you a lot of other questions. I have no idea.
Great.
So anyway,
Great.
we're just moving from Humanities to the front of the line instead of the back. Not yet. You're going to share screen?
Yeah,
Or not?
figure that. I've done this before, I promise. Autumn is getting that much as I can. So for the record, Emily Burns, the Joint Fiscal Office, here to go through the Senate changes to the Budget Adjustment Act. The Senate passed H 790 this morning on third reading, and that's it forthwith out. There were not very many changes, which you'll notice. There are, however, I would say a few that probably warrant further conversation. Here or at a committee of conference. Obviously up to you, but there are a few areas.
I think maybe I'll back up for a minute while you're getting ready. So I'm just going to go over all the changes. And then it's my intent that we will do a straw poll. We will not have it in our committee. That we would do a straw poll to vote for a committee of conference. I'm going to hold that till tomorrow morning because we have 3 people who aren't here today. So I'd like to just have everybody, maybe they'll watch this or not, but then we can have the full committee vote on that. And the intent would be, it will be on the notice calendar tomorrow. And assuming the minority leader is willing, we'll ask her to pull it off the notice calendar for the purpose of creating a committee of conference. I will stand up and say we did a straw poll and it was whatever. that we'd like to request a committee of conference. And at that point, the speaker will announce the committee of conference, which means then we can get going. And start meeting maybe Thursday and Friday. I don't think this is gonna take a long time, but we would like to get it done so we can all focus on FY 27. So that's the plan. Okay. All right, thanks.
Great. So this spreadsheet should look familiar. Change it. And so you've got the House column. Now there's a column for the Senate and the differences from the House. There's a lot of gray. There are no changes until you get down to, I can find it myself, the very bottom of the page, row 63, for the Meals on Wheels appropriation. Blue, sorry. What color did I say? Whatever.
Yeah, it looks like light blue to me.
Light blue, yes. In light blue, row 63, the Meals on Wheels appropriation to Department of Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living. The House had added $30,000, and the Senate added an additional $50,000, making the total to Meals on Wheels up to $80,000.
Are you allowed to share what their conversation was?
I believe so, yeah. So and there's one other change on the back page, so you'll see where the money came from.
Okay.
Because there are only two changes to the dollar amounts. First one is this additional $50,000 to Meals on Wheels. The second is on line 92, a one-time appropriation to the Agency of Agriculture for Vermonters Feeding Vermonters. They reduced that by $40,000 to ship it to Meals on Wheels. The reason why there's a $10,000 difference is that when you all finished the Budget Adjustment Act, there was approximately $1,500 on the bottom line, and the Senate spent an additional 10. There's still about $5,000 left on the bottom line. But that is where why the net impact is $10,000.
So that's how we got there, but why? What?
Yeah, was there a conversation? I mean, when we heard from Wheels on Meals, whatever we put in the budget, they seemed to be, that was what they asked for.
Right.
And that was what we appropriated or proposed to appropriate. So what was the conversation?
And I think that's a good question, I think, for the senators, but I think it was just, that's where they wanted to put money into feeding seniors.
Right.
I mean, I understand, I mean, we're all feeding people who don't have as easy access. It's just that the Vermont Feeding Vermonters program is a program to fund farmers to provide the food, and Meals on Wheels is providing food. So there's a difference in what the money is doing.
So that would be a good question to find out why they did that. Because yes, you're exactly right. They requested 30,000 and that's what we meant they requested.
Right.
Okay. So those are the two number changes. That's it. The next two lines I highlighted in blue, are just to what's going on there. It's a little bit more complicated, and it will also, so you can hear about it a second time when Brady walks through the language. But in B 1100 part 2, or you were amending section B 1100 subpart B subpart 2, was the area, I believe it was section 78 and 79. Okay. This was where you set aside $5 million for the public housing authorities for Section 8 vouchers. What the House had passed was redirecting $5 million of the $50 million appropriated to the agency administration to be utilized by the emergency board in the event that federal funds went away. So the House had $5 million from the Secretary of Admin, and then it wasn't an appropriation, it was like redirect the money for that purpose, right? And then the language that Ledge Council had recommended in terms of how what the program should look like.
Right.
The technical letter from the administration said just appropriate it separately, not do this redesignation of the 50 million. So initially there was conversation about just setting up an entire new appropriation, reducing the 50 million to 45 million, and then setting up $5 million. Then there was some further conversations about the fact that the federal government passed a budget and it included funding for Section 8 vouchers, more so than I think initially was anticipated. Still not, I believe, the amount that they need, about 95% of it. The housing authorities won't know their final allocations, as I understand it, until early March. But the Senate didn't have enough information and wanted more time to understand sort of what the implications of that were, what was the best course of action in terms of setting money aside for this. Rather than make it a flat 5 million, they said like the E-board can redirect money for this purpose from that same appropriation
As needed.
as needed, yep, and kept the structure of the program the same as the House did in terms of like how to allocate the funds, but changed it sort of based on that additional information about actually having a federal appropriation.
Then we can respond with the right amount if anything is needed. And then the emergency board would be doing it.
Yeah, so the language was that the emergency board would make the transfers if needed. There is a little bit of a, challenge that the emergency board doesn't do that when the legislature is in session.
Right.
So it would mean that if something needed to happen before the legislature adjourned, the legislature would have to take action. Either through, making a change in the budget adjustment accordingly, putting something in the budget, running a separate bill. Otherwise, when the legislature is out of session, the emergency board could take action. And that the program structure would exist in the budget adjustment.
And does the E-board ever meet when we're in session, other than to accept the forecast?
Right, there's the January meeting, and I think if there was a need to be another revenue downgrade, the emergency board would meet. I believe that their language does not allow the transfer of appropriations when the legislature is in session.
Okay. So hypothetically, because I'm not suggesting I want to do this, if we found out everything and we could make a decision the week we're on town meeting break, does that mean we're not in session and the E-board can meet that week?
I am not a lawyer. I don't know the answer.
I don't want to do that. I'm not suggesting we should do
I
that.
believe you're still in session on town, like the biennium has it, like you have an.
Okay, yeah, all right,
Don't quote me.
I'm just curious. I don't want to meet that week. I just want to, okay.
At the end of the session, she announced this. At the end of the session.
But
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I certainly learned, and I think that this committee heard when, there was testimony about this, is that budgets, these organizations are already setting their budgets. And if they anticipate a 5% decrease in the budget, which is what is right now in the federal budget, that will result in cutting vouchers now. Because they don't have the kinds of reserves, they used a lot of their reserves last year in order to cover them. And I just wonder, like, how does an E-board get called? Who gets to call the meeting?
Well, the governor can, or 2/3
Majority of the
Two-thirds of the majority of the board, so, right, 3 people on the E-board, there's 5 of us. 3 people can call it. If the governor doesn't call it. Those are the 2 ways that can be called. But it sounds like in statute, which we have to look at, that might be interesting. We did that last year, I'm just, again, guessing, but maybe we should look at that again. The statute says when, what the E-board can do when. So what I'm hearing is that because we're in session, the priority goes to the General Assembly, which makes sense to me. And then, so either we can put it in here, or we fast track a bill, or I don't know if we'll know more by the time the committee of conference meets. This is clearly a reason to have the committee of conference to have this conversation. Tom and John.
Where does the fiscal committee fit? Can they appropriate money and are they, no,
At the moment, we've appropriated this for the E-board.
right,
Nobody can appropriate except for the General Assembly. The emergency board has the authority to transfer appropriations, but they can't make any new ones. So
right.
Okay, John?
I'm just trying to think back to our conversation about the Section 8 vouchers here. We proposed what we did here because of the immediacy, right?
Right.
Tiff was speaking to here.
Right.
Otherwise, it would disappear. Right? We would
Yeah.
aim that back any place, correct?
So welcome to
I'm
the
just
world of
kinda-
Washington policy.
Right.
It It
changing.
seems to be changing and it
Have
is.
it, we just would lose it, perhaps not get that amount. Total.
Yeah, do you want to answer that question?
I didn't
I
hear
got
the
you.
whole question.
Yeah. Well, we did this because if we did not do this right here, the immediacy of the need would do what we intended to do here with this. And we would not receive perhaps that amount on the federal end
Right.
of things in the future.
That's right.
Is that correct?
And once.
I think
yeah,
about these things, I think about
Once you
transportation.
lost it, you don't get it
You
back.
don't get it back.
And this isn't by application. So it doesn't commit to spending the whole $5 million.
Correct, but it's,
As I understand it, we're drawing down based on need so that the public housing authorities don't have to shelve vouchers in anticipation of the 5% cut. Or more,
so,
depending on the whims of,
so
Really more
That's-
because we need to
Yeah.
understand this better.
yeah.
And 5% is, if you transfer the 5% to the conversation about dollars, I mean, they receive about, last year, about $93 million in total for the program, so 5%
Close
is
to the
close to 5 million.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and so we'll have to hear what the Senate said, Marty, and then
So. If we're worried that there might not be enough money, and so that's why we took the case we did, we said we could take the 5 out of the 50 that was already set aside. Playing the devil's advocate here, what if we decided to spend that 5 anyway? And in order to shore up these organizations so they can have the vouchers while we wait to decide what, or to wait to find out what the federal government is doing. And so we say, okay, we're going to authorize you, go ahead, take 5 out of the 50 and use it for this particular purpose. Does that then invalidate the purpose of setting aside the 50 million because it was supposed to be for the potential loss of federal money? And if we don't really lose federal money, can we have spent that 5 million?
No,
Complicated than it should be.
well, if we are losing, because if we were only getting 95%, then we are losing.
Right, but do we know that? That we're.
That's
only
what-
getting
that's what we-
95?
That's as much as we know from the federal government.
So that may be, so it may be that we also put language in, again, talking off the top of my head, up to 5 million to cover the loss. And then the rest would
Should it
stay in
occur.
there. Right. So I think there's ways to do a language that will protect us and protect the housing authority, but we clearly need to know a little bit more than we know right now. And the Senate had access to other information and we'll find out more. And I think that's part of what we'll be trying to figure out this week.
And I'm confused.
We
We had.
all are, join the club.
We had no money for this group of people. We put $5 million in from the 50 million. Because it wasn't gonna be there.
That's right.
Now, I just thought I heard someone say, all of you say, maybe, that there's whatever passed the Senate or whatever passed in Washington, put back most of that money, there's smaller amount that's not there.
So we knew they were gonna get some money.
Right.
We knew they were gonna get some money. We didn't know how much they were gonna get. We always knew they were gonna get some money. It wasn't gonna be no money.
This is like in their continuing resolution or whatever they do.
Yeah.
Based on last year. So are we still missing 5 million or are we not missing 5 million? Or is this still up in the air and we don't know?
See.
Don't know.
It's up in the air, but we think that they are losing money. Oh, wait, James?
For the record, Jim, during fiscal, so Section 8 housing vouchers are not funded at the moment for continuing resolution. They receive a full federal fiscal year appropriations
Last year.
No, right now.
The current federal fiscal year.
Let him finish. Yeah, go ahead.
The current federal fiscal year appropriation for vouchers is about 90% more than what the housing authorities receive under the continuing resolution. It's the understanding of Vermont State Housing Authority that 90% increase for vouchers that will come down through HUD is about 95% of what they need. So they're changing their emergency levels.
So it's actually not a cut from last year.
It's an increase from last year of
In
about 9%
dollars.
for vouchers.
Okay.
But the housing authorities are estimating it's still only 95% of what they need to maintain current needs.
They
pay the vouchers that they have?
Yes,
Are those current vouchers?
yes. So there's, per the Vermont State Housing Authority, a 5% delta between what was passed nationally and what would be needed nationally to maintain the current amount of vouchers currently in
So
circulation.
without this 5 million or whatever the number is, people on existing vouchers would lose their vouchers.
Public housing authorities would plan to retire vouchers as they can throughout the year through attrition, for example, anticipating that they received about 5% less than what they need to make ends meet by the end of the year.
So
So
by the end of the-
anticipating that 5% shortfall, housing authorities would be retiring vouchers through attrition as they're able throughout the year in order to meet what they expect.
So, and nobody new could come on with the vouchers. When people exit the vouchers, it's because they don't need it anymore and they've qualified for more permanent housing that doesn't require Section 8. That's one of the ways that people don't use vouchers. And then those are recycled to a new person on a waiting list who then gets off of homelessness or whatever and gets a voucher. But what you're saying is if we end up with attrition, people that get new housing, but nobody new can come on, and you reduce the number of vouchers the following year for people who need it. And we already know that our homeless population is a lot higher than it used to be, so that's
So
fewer
wasn't
people
that
that
what
get.
it was when we started VA to begin with? That they were going to be retiring some and they were gonna do some by attrition and they just wouldn't renew them.
They got rid of the waiting list. They like took vouchers back for people who were waiting. 130 vouchers are gone.
There are projects, development projects also that have a certain number of vouchers assigned to them.
Yeah.
Without them, then those projects have to find other funding to make them viable. So it jeopardizes not just people, but the projects that are kind of online.
Right. I've got to, there's one in Middlebury where they have a whole section of housing that's dependent on this. That's there. Yeah. John.
Well, so with this conversation we just had here, I'm wondering if this is really, could it be handled just with some language? We're going to be out of session when? In just a handful of months. I'm just thinking about the course of the year as things change.
Yeah. Well, this is why I think in the committee of conference, we'll probably talk about what language could be and what, try to get a handle on how it would work. So I don't know if it'll be language or money, but I mean, it won't be new money. It's money that we've already set aside, so it's not affecting general fund, whatever we do.
Right, which being a member of the E-board can be acted upon once we're finished with the session,
After the session.
after the session.
Okay, so what this language says here is that the Senate is looking to use money from a contingent appropriation.
So I think when we get to language, Grady will tell us the details, and I'm gonna turn to James for a second.
And I think it might be helpful to switch. I think what you would hear from the housing authorities is that there's two kinds of voucher retirements that this proposal was contemplated to address. The first are routine voucher retirements through attrition that housing authorities do throughout the year proactively based on their best guess of what their allocation from HUD is going to be. So that come year end, their expenses are in line with their spending authority. Right. However, there are only so many opportunities to return vouchers through attrition because the housing authorities don't control when somebody graduates out of the program for one reason or another. That leads to a situation like what we encountered at the end of calendar year 25, where several housing authorities found themselves in shortfall at the end of the year, needing to retire, cancel in-use vouchers rather suddenly in order to bring costs in line with their spending authority at the end of the year. That's a much more disruptive conversation for program participants than retiring as vouchers are returned, right? That was a conversation about taking away vouchers from people who are actively using them in order to bring spending authority in line with appropriations at the very end of the year. So I think what the housing authorities would tell you is knowing how much money is available sooner rather than later will allow them to more accurately plan how many vouchers they may have to retire through attrition during the year, and help them to avoid a situation where there's a glut of vouchers that have to be canceled that are currently
So suddenly you don't have your housing paid for.
at the end of the year.
Yeah.
It is how I expect they would describe a trade-off to people. That if they don't know how much money is available now, they may be in a position of having to retire first to cancel.
But it's not as bad as they thought back in July.
No, it's changed with the whim of the federal government every,
Because I think what he described is what I understood it to be.
yeah,
That they were canceling existing ones because they didn't have the money.
that's right.
Now there's been a new bill and now there is some money, but we're not exactly sure how much.
And they'll still probably have to cancel some.
And I think that's the trade-off for the committee of conference to weigh is to what extent do you all want to weigh in during the year event that's kind of more routine retirement vouchers through attrition, or to what extent do you reserve general incentives involved for that year-end conversation where you might be looking at a larger amount of vouchers actually, canceled on a more sudden basis. I think those are the trade-offs that I'll be talking about.
That's
committee of conference.
Okay, wait.
So it seems to me there's only two questions. One question is, do you want us to have $5 million set aside for that purpose? And do you want to change the language so it's only up to that instead of them taking it all?
There might be more questions than that, but those are two questions for sure.
Do you want to give them more money?
Well, and I think that's why they took the dollar amount out. I don't know for sure, but we, when we're in the community conference, we need to ask the Senate those questions so that we better understand what they knew that we don't know as much and what their thinking was, why they got to this language. And so we'll hear that from Grady when we get there. And that's section 8 for the moment. So let's go on to the next one, Emily.
So the next one is a new section. There's no actual appropriations in it, but I wanted to put it on the number sheet because it does affect the numbers. So this is related to the disability services payment reform. There was language in the House version of the budget adjustment that said, was sort of placeholder language, which I think everybody understood, to have the DAs and the state work together to come up with a solution that was workable to deal with some of the cash flow challenges and the challenges associated with implementing the new payment models and the transition period between the old system and the new payment reform. Those parties, the DAs and the administration, came to an agreement on some new language that is now in the Budget Adjustment Act. It does, however, come with a price tag. I believe prior to this language, the payment was, 45%, I believe, of the anticipated costs. That threshold was moved up 60 or 65%. That means that AHS will have to put out more funds to the DAs to cover that need. It's anticipated to cost about $9.5 million gross global commitment. The state impact of that is $3.9 million of general funds. What was agreed upon was that rather than try to find money in the budget adjustment for that purpose, AHS and the administration agreed to take it from the human services caseload reserve if needed. So AHS, if they have savings or if they can figure out within their budget how to cover it, they will. But if they get to year end and they don't have any capacity, then finance and management can transfer money out of the caseload reserve for that purpose.
So it's no new general fund from our standpoint that we can find.
Correct. Caseload reserve is at about $91 million, or it was at the end of 2025, so it's not.
It's in good shape.
It's okay. That's the last.
And was this also prospective payments, and there'll be a reconciliation at the end? So the agencies, the DAs, whoever, will have to give money back if they were under the 65%. I think that's my understanding of that.
And I think right on a go forward basis, right, they'll get a prospective payment and there'll be reconciliation sort of happening at the same time. So they can manage the cash flow. But right now where they're only receiving the prospective payment without having the reconciliation process happening simultaneously, you can't, it's hard to manage.
And they weren't even having a prospective payment. That was part of the problem. They weren't going to get paid for 17 months, which most of us couldn't operate that. So. So not lots, but some significant issues to talk about. So is this where I call Brady up?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna go over to the side, but I'll be here.
Okay.
Unless you want me to say.
Good. And are you handing things out, Brady?
Yep.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So grading next and David, yep.
I assume these will be posted on our website.
Thank you.
Green and red sheets.
Yeah, okay. It was a much bolder green and it was very difficult to read.
Right.
Message.
Okay. Take us where you want us to go.
Thank you, Grady Nixon, Joint Fiscal Office. So as Emily mentioned, the Senate did not make too many changes. So this document, you'll see on the left side, it shows House changes from the Gov Rec language. And then on the right side, Senate changes from the House language. So we'll start with section 51, which is amendments to the one-time appropriations. The House changed the Gov Rec language by appropriating 3 million to AOA for ADAC. The House also appropriated 800,000 global commitment to DEVA for non-emergency medical transportation. And you also see the appropriation in section 51 of the House bill for the general fund, federal fund match, which is appropriated to AHS. The House appropriated 167,000 general fund to the Department of Health for Bridges to Health, 228,000 substance misuse prevention special fund, and 192,000 general fund to recovery centers impacted by equal payment distribution, and increase the appropriation to agriculture, food, and markets for the Vermont Food Bank's Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program for a total appropriation of $900,000. The Senate made a few changes in this section. They modified language for non-emergency medical transportation funding.
So pause for a second. So let's just go back to, we made a change with the $3 million, they agreed.
Yes.
Okay, so let's sort of go make sure we're for all of them, even if they didn't change it.
Yep.
Okay.
So you'll see on page 2 of this document, this language change appears twice, again, because the appropriation is made both to the Agency of Human Services for the general fund and federal fund match for non-emergency medical transport, and then also to DEVA. So here you'll see the Senate changed it from saying supplemental to a one-time payment increase.
Okay. Does that mean we're going to have the same problem again?
It does not impact the nature of this appropriation. It was a one-time appropriation in the House bill as well. So the language further clarifies that this is a one-time payment increase, but in terms of the actual appropriation, it was a one-time appropriation.
That was our intent, is to have this one. This may not be a question for you, but I do want to raise the question. I think they've come to us with this before, and if this is one time, I'm guessing we're going to hear from them again until we structurally fix the problem.
Right, so it was not in Act 27, but it was in Act 113, which was the FY 25 bill. So.
Okay. But it wasn't in the
26 budget.
It wasn't in the 26 budget.
No, but this would add it to it. Then you'll see on the left side of this page, the 167,000 to Bridges to Health. The Senate accepted that. The Senate also accepted the House addition of 228,000 Substance Misuse Prevention Special Fund and 192,000 General Fund for recovery centers. And then you'll see on the right side of the page, continuing on to page 3, this is a Senate amendment to subsection O, subdivision 6. In Act 27, there was a $250,000 general fund appropriation for a grant to establish a new women's recovery residence per the criteria of the Vermont Recovery Housing Program Action Plan. That was an appropriation that initially was in the capital bill and then it moved over into Act 27, the budget. This language the Senate adds clarifies that up to 50,000 may be used for activities otherwise designated non-eligible for the criteria of that action plan. The action plan prevents the use of grant funds under that program for operating expenses and personal services costs. So this would allow 20% of that appropriation to be used for operating expenses and personal services.
Who gets the 20%?
So this is a grant from the Department of Economic Development per criteria of this housing program action plan, which is mostly HUD funds. So this is not obviously HUD funds.
So DED wants 20% for administrative costs?
No, it would go to the grant recipient.
Oh.
It would just allow them, they would not be limited to use those
Okay.
funds only for
All right.
only for essentially the purchase of a physical building.
Is this money coming from is this new money added?
This is not new money. It's just adding language relating to an appropriation that was in Act 27.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
On page 3, you'll see that the Senate modified the language for the Land Access and Opportunity Board. And I apologize that the original House construct should have been included here. The House language said that this was for the Land Access and Opportunity Board's Homes for All and Homes for All Phase 2 initiatives. This language change has it just as Homes for All initiative and for community resilience grants.
We know what phase 2 was?
No more than that it was the second phase.
Is it, yeah, I wonder if it's covered in the Homes for All initiative.
I would have to get back to you with an answer on whether or not Homes for All initiative includes Homes for All Phase 2. But I believe that this request came from the board.
Okay, if you could just clarify that was, thank you.
Then you'll see that the House added, again, this is the 800,000 global commitment element of that supplemental non-emergency medical transportation funding. And the Senate, again, modified that language, taking out supplemental and switching in a one-time payment increase. And then on page 4, the final change is the Senate reduced the additional appropriation to Vermonters Feeding Vermonters by $40,000. So it's reflected as $860,000 in the bill.
We didn't have language increasing the 30 to 60,000 or 30 to 80,000 for Meals on Wheels, the Vermont Center for Independent Living.
No. So you'll see later on, the Senate added a section touching on that, but in the House version of the bill, there was no language related to it.
Okay, thank you.
Section 58, the House added language in the child care contribution reserve section, just clarifying that a transfer would be made after the funds reserved were unreserved. In the administration technical letter, they clarified that that language was unnecessary, so the Senate took it out.
We agree it's unnecessary?
JFO reviewed the technical letter and
Okay
consulted
with
finance and yes.
You're okay, we're okay.
Section 78, the House amended this appropriation, the 50 million to AOA to address federal funding reductions. That's that e-board money that Emily was speaking about a moment ago. The House amended the language to include a reference to utilizing the appropriation for other purposes related to federal funding changes, and also added carry forward language. The Senate agreed to both of those changes, but also added in language relating to allowing the appropriation to be used for extraordinary public safety costs.
Without a specific amount.
Correct.
People coming to, ICE.
Or they're thinking about it.
To incur extraordinary public safety costs.
Right.
So it's expanding the use of the $50 million.
Correct.
It's not guaranteeing it.
It would make it an allowable use if the e-board would be able to transfer funds for that purpose.
Okay. And so this sort of gets us back to, same with HUD, right? That if it's the e-board, it would be out of session.
Correct.
And if there was an urgent need to do something while the General Assembly is in session, we could put through a bill or something like that. I guess that's kind of our.
Correct. And the language that both bodies added, stating that the General Assembly may designate these funds for other purposes related to federal funding changes, that is the language that gives the General Assembly the authority to touch that money during the session.
So if we have that sentence, why do we need the one above it? Or in the event? Or I guess it's not federal funding changes? Is that why it's not really federal funding
It
changes?
says increase federal action.
Right, not federal funding changes. Okay,
And that sentence solely applies to the e-board authority, whereas that General Assembly language is just
right.
more broad.
Just a question about when you see a phrase, like when I see a phrase like this, my question goes to, well, is federal action defined? And does it matter?
This language was drafted by legislative council, so we could have them come in if you'd like them to speak to that. I'm not sure if there's a strict definition.
I know what they're talking about,
Yeah,
but any increased federal action, does that mean they want to pave more roads for it? You know, or
but, well, if they want to pave more roads for us, that would be lovely. It's if we incurred extraordinary public safety costs. So I guess if we had a lot of, yeah, well, then we might want to do it. If they're willing to come
I'm
in
just
with a few
curious, I'm
hundred
just-
million bucks. I
I'm
would be
being a little
willing to pay that.
picayune about
I
it
know.
because it's just
Yes.
a phrase that's very, 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 very broad.
Yes,
And if we could either get a definition or narrow it without being whatever, you know, I mean, we
I
know
think
what we're
that's the
talking
careful,
about.
right, I
but-
think that's why we're being careful about. Because there could be other things that it might make sense to. And it would be the e-board would have to do this.
Yeah.
So the e-board could decide if it wanted to meet to do this. Okay,
Section 79. So this is the HUD voucher language. The House designated 5 million of that appropriation for assisting housing authorities while maintaining housing assistance payments and preventing voucher termination. The Senate, as Emily mentioned, modified the language to allow the emergency board to utilize that appropriation for the same purpose. And you'll see a couple changes related to that. So in subsection A, the Senate added language clarifies in fiscal year 2026 and 2027, while the General Assembly is not in session, the emergency board shall have the authority to transfer part of the appropriation in 2025 Acts and Resolves number 27, section B1101 B2, so that $50 million appropriation. And then because no state entity is being designated in the House language, it was the Agency of Administration. Here, the Senate made a few corresponding changes, just reflecting that until the emergency board were to determine that they would like to utilize that appropriation for that purpose. In sub B, sub C, and sub D, you'll see the language now says if funds are transferred for this purpose. And then in sub D2, the Senate added language clarifying that if the emergency board were to make funds available to each housing authority, they must do so proportionally based on the number of housing assistance payments in use statewide as of January 1st, 2026. And then in sub A, a housing authority shall notify the designated state entity of its intent to utilize funds on or before October 1st, 2026. And then in sub B, in the event a housing authority chooses not to utilize the funds, the proportional funds be set aside for that housing authority shall be made available to the remaining housing authorities in accordance with the procedures that the designated state entity establishes.
So they don't designate a state entity here.
So no, yes, it would be for the emergency board to.
The board will designate the state entity.
Right.
Okay. That's one big change. They'll be knocking on our door. And I'm wondering about the October 1st date.
Right, the language in sub A and sub B was added quite late in the Senate Appropriations Committee process. And the Joint Fiscal Office and Ledge Council flagged potential issues with that language that would need to be addressed in conference.
I think that's too early, given what happened last year. I mean, I can see they might have picked that date because it's the start of a new fiscal year for the state government. But if we have another government shutdown and that's not going to be enough time. So. Okay. It's going to make a note. Anybody else have other questions about that? Not yet. Go ahead.
Section 83, this language was added by the House, and this is the quote unquote placeholder language that would direct Dale to consult with the General Assembly, the DAs, and the SSAs to identify solutions that address short-term financial challenges of payment reform. The Senate wholesale replaced this section with language directing Dale to adjust the payment model for DAs and SSAs based on a minimum assumed utilization rate of 65%. This is what Emily was discussing a moment ago. And then in the final subsection of this section on page 7, in sub E, that's where you'll see the language relating to the unreserving of the Human Services caseload reserve if necessary.
Yeah, go
I'm just
ahead.
going to go back up to this date piece on page 6 of
On page 6?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you think the October 1 is too early, will it be too late to utilize funds within that calendar year to work back to the.
Right, so it might be December 1st. How late did the shutdown go this last year?
November 11th.
That's right, it was like 5 weeks or something. Okay,
I'm thinking the same thing you are. If something happens again, it gets.
right. So if we did December 1st, that would be 2 months after the beginning of the fiscal year, but we'll work that out, I guess.
Yeah, just thinking.
I would note that this particular language was initially drafted as a proposed amendment to the House construct before the other Senate appropriations changes were made.
Yeah.
So it doesn't quite mesh with this section as written just generally.
Right,
And so the Joint Fiscal Office and Ledge Council worked on this and have some proposed technical recommendations.
love to get your opinion on that, but
Thanks.
it's too early.
The legislation is back in session in January.
Right, it'll be a new biennium, but this would be until new people are sworn in, it would be the current e-board that we have now. And so that's why we want to do it in December. I mean, because once we get into January, then we're back to the General Assembly dealing with it and, yeah, okay. All right, so we're back to payment reform and I did get some. I'm not the only one who got this, but Nolan sent me something about the dates and timing around when people should meet. Yeah, when the report back comes, when the meeting with legislator and advocates happens, when would be the best time or good time to have the meeting with legislators? Because I think at one point it was written here in June, and I don't know that everybody wants to come back in June to have a meeting about this, if we can do something right here. So just letting you all know that the dates that are in here. We have an April 15th date on a progress report, which may be fine. Do we want to have the meeting and have before that and have a later progress report? And then what happens on this convening a meeting? So how we set how this all plays out in order, what the best order is for the meeting and the report is what we're going to work on. And thankfully, they also have designees. Because the reports, the meeting at the moment is with chairs of House and Senate Appropriations, Human Services, and Health and Welfare, or their designees. So I will be designated. Probably to Representative Iacoboni, as this is his specialty.
Yeah. Well, we also have a June 30th meeting.
Right, that's C section, yeah, with June 30th and then April 15th. So I think the Senate just kind of put dates in, but we need to think that through and whether how it's actually going to play out. So I'm guessing those dates are going to change. But they did what we wanted, which was to put payment reform, like figure it out quite a bit more than we were able to in the 2 days that we had to figure out payment reform. So that was good. Thank you, Senate.
These last three changes, so sections 86, 87, 88. The first two were added per the administration's technical letter to clarify the purpose of funding that was in the House version of the bill. So section 86 is where you'll see language speaking to Meals on Wheels funding. So you'll see 80,000 there.
Description.
Exactly. So 80,000 still appropriated in section B 330, just language being added here to clarify that it is for providing home delivered meals. Section 87, similar construct. This is clarifying that of the global commitment appropriation in section B 334.1, 35,226 shall be used to increase payments to the area agencies on aging. 267,888 shall be used to increase payments to tier 1 enhanced residential care facilities, and the remainder shall be used for nursing home emergency financial relief.
Numbers didn't change, but we added language to clarify.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the last is, this was not, that description is erroneous. This was not in the administration's technical letter, but the Senate added similar language just because the administration flagged it in the other two instances. So this is clarifying that of the global commitment appropriation in section B 333, 9.5 million shall be for a one-time transition funding for the first year of developmental disability services, home and community-based services payment reform implementation. So that is language relating to global commitment for that DA SSA payment reform language. And then for the earlier language that the committee saw, the global commitment federal fund, there's no new addition of funds for that. It would be from existing appropriations in the AHS budget or the Human Services Caseload Reserve. Those funds are insufficient.
So I keep calling it in my head payment reform and thinking about Dale, but this is the actual full title of it with the developmental disability services, home and community-based services. It's
Correct.
that, it's one of those long things. Okay. Just want to be sure we aren't like leaving somebody out that's supposed to be part of the payment reform after all that. Done it before. Okay. Any questions from anybody in the committee at this point? No? All makes sense. You can see we have a few things to converse with the Senate about. But overall, I think we did a pretty darn good job with our bill. So, yes, I think so. So I'm gonna ask us to vote on this tomorrow morning when Dave should be in and Trevor should be in. And we'll figure out when in the calendar, but this is a straw poll, and we should do it pretty quickly. You know, as long as I get it done before the floor tomorrow, so we'll find a time tomorrow to do that. Great, thank you, Grady, thank you, Emily, thank you, James. Why don't we take a break at 2:45 instead? Okay, so the one at the end, like humanities is coming first. So we're gonna end a little bit earlier today. Okay. All right. Yes, what?
Yes, I was.
BSO's coming first, but humanities has moved back. I don't want one at 3:45. We have